It all began with my friends, Brent Maddock and Steve Wilson, a number of years ago. It's been over 10 years now, that we wanted to make a movie together. We had been making educational films together, and Steve had this wacky idea that he called Land Shark.
The very original idea for Tremors, the fragment that kicked it all off, I came up with a number of years ago when I was working for the Navy. I was editing films for the Navy, but I was doing this out in the middle of the desert in California, where they have a base where they test things. And on the weekends I would go off and wander around out on the ranges when they weren't shooting at them, and I was climbing rocks one day, and I was sitting up on a rock, and I made a note and scrap of paper. What if there was something under the ground and I couldn't get off this rock? And that note just sat in a file folder then for a number of years. And later, Brent and I sold Short Circuit, and our agent, Nancy Roberts, sat us down and said, okay, now, get all those old ideas out of your file folders. And we got a number of them out, and she picked about 3 of them to really pursue and develop, and one of them was what we then started calling Land Sharks. After that time, actually, Saturday Night Live started doing the character Land Shark, so we dispensed with that title, that working title. And then it just went through many permutations after that.
And we took the idea around to various studios and pitched it. And people would stare at us blankly and like, what what kind of movie would this be with underground monsters that we called graboids? They didn't quite get it. It's because it's a tonal balancing act too. It was a hard movie to describe in a short paragraph or two. So Nancy encouraged Brent and Steve to write the screenplay so that we would have something on paper to actually show people that we did have an idea about what this movie would be like. And Nancy took it to Gail Ann Hurd, who executive produced the movie, and she responded to the material immediately, and she came out of low-budget filmmaking as we all did, so she really understood that we knew how to make this kind of movie. And the idea for the movie came from a very low-budget idea to take a monster that's invisible most of the movie because it's underground. And so we, with Gail, we went to Universal Studios, and overnight, literally, they said yes.
Since this was our first feature, we really, Steve and I as producers, we were involved with everything, with casting, with finding the locations, with the costumes, with really every aspect of the film.
We bugged everybody about everything.
Yeah, and it was fun. And I mean, Ron was great too. Ron was really gracious in having us be involved in a way that a lot of directors would not allow, producers to be. So it was fun. It was a real collaboration, and it worked well. And I think one of the things we had to learn in the process of making the film was there was only so far we could go. I think at some point you got to step back and let Ron direct the movie.
Yeah.
One of the first people that Gail Ann Hurd introduced me to in this film was our production designer, the person we had as our production designer, Ivo Cristante, and he became just such a phenomenal asset for the making of the movie. He brought so much in terms of his designs, and he's also a wonderful, has great mechanical effects knowledge also. So he was very instrumental in the creation of the buildings and the sets to work in a effects way, which was great. Ivo, we started searching for a location for the movie, and we went throughout the western United States. And it was very difficult finding the right location for this movie, because we needed a valley, a desert floor that was surrounded by mountains, that had a cliff down to a lower plane at one end of the valley. And that was a hard group of variables to find in a movie-friendly place, somewhere that would be close enough to hotels and all the things you need to make a movie. And also we needed rock formations, interesting rock formations that would provide safety for our characters.
We found a location south of Lone Pine, about 30 miles south of Lone Pine. And it turned out great. Ivo Cristante, our production designer, went in there with typical enthusiasm and built this whole town and made it look old. You know, we even paved a little section of this tiny little dirt road that was there.
I mean, absolutely everything was built.
And Ivo had 2 months to build this entire town. And he had a great crew. They worked very quickly. And he designed the centerpiece of the town. Pham Van's store was originally called, later changed to Chang's when we cast a Chinese actor instead of a Vietnamese actor. And it was built to collapse and go back together immediately for take 2, which was a really wonderful design where the roof could fall apart and we could take it apart in stages as much as we wanted.
What do you think?
Ground's getting closer, Earl.
Yeah.
I say we go with Miguel's plan.
It was really ingenious and simple. As most of the effects in this movie were kind of simple. The movie was made with bulldozer technology, and we tried to make everything as sort of simple and foolproof as possible. However, most of the effects didn't work the first time, as with most effects movies. It just became agony for me as a first-time director too, not being used to whatever you plan for, something else happens, and the effects were certainly often that way, especially the physical effects, because we were trying to do things that were impossible. We were trying to create the illusion that these 30-foot underground monsters were barreling through the desert at high speed, and it's something that is kind of difficult in the real world to actually do.
When we got out there to make Tremors, the three of us together, the experience was, it was amazing to find out the experience was the same. Making an $11 or $12 million feature was the same experience as making a $20,000 educational film. You know, we didn't have enough money, we didn't have enough time, and we were basically sort of, you know, winging it, you know, as we went along.
So, solving difficult problems in the same way.
Yeah.
Winging it's not quite right. We had elaborate storyboards and we had planned it out, but things nevertheless go wrong, and that's when you rely on your experience to solve them.
Yeah.
One of the big nightmares, effects-wise, for the film was the sinking of the car. It was the last night of photography, and we were running out of night, and the car, we had a water pit, basically, that was filled with vermiculite, this dirt-like substance, and the vermiculite just absorbed water like crazy, and it became solid like ground, and we could not get that car to sink down into it. The sequence was storyboarded to go a little farther. The actress was going to kick the windshield out and get up on the bumper, and she's going down on the ship as it's sinking, screaming out into the night up on the bumper, and we just couldn't ever get to that part of the scene because we couldn't get the car to go down, first of all. So it was a very frustrating night. One of the effects that worked the first time and every time that was one of my favorites in the film was when the jackhammer pierces the graboid and it shoots across through the pavement, across the roadway. And that was actually done in a very simple way with a track that was laid under the ground, and the jackhammer was set into that track, and then the track was covered with an asphalt, very soft asphalt look that just broke away as the jackhammer was pulled. Another one that actually worked, though, was the moving hump that went throughout the desert and was racing toward Kevin Bacon at the end of the film at the cliff. And that was a simple technique that was just a trough dug by a tractor out in the desert. And we put a boat buoy in the trough, covered the whole trough with a dirt mat, and then pulled it with a truck, pulled this buoy around, and it really gave the sense of the moving hump of this creature.
Hi, I'm Rhonda Lebeck. I'm up here for the semester.
Yeah, geography. Geology.
Yeah, well, actually, seismology. Earthquakes. And you two must be Val and Earl. I've heard all about you.
We deny everything.
Kevin, I loved his work from the time of Animal House and Diner, and certainly Footloose. He really carried that movie off so well, and he obviously was an actor who had a sense of humor, but also was very real, and that's what we were looking for. And Fred, I loved him from The Right Stuff and Escape from Alcatraz. The film that I thought actually showed me Fred was so right for this more than anybody was Euphoria. A little scene film, but he played a character in it that I just thought, whoa, this guy is Earl. Earl Bassett needs to be played by Fred Ward. And we were so lucky that he immediately responded to the script, and he and Kevin it was a match made in heaven. Finn Carter was someone who came in to read for the part. I really wasn't familiar with her work, but she just blew us away. Michael Gross was the last person I would have thought for originally for Burt Gummer at the time, because he had been playing the father on Family Ties at that time. He had just done the FBI Murders, but I hadn't seen that TV movie that showed a very different side of Michael. Very different from Tremors as well, but it showed that certainly this actor has a great range, and he came in to read for the part, which we were lucky to get someone of his caliber to come in and want to read for the part. And once again, I was so blown away by his performance, and he was jumping up on the couch, standing on the table in the room, and it was just wonderful. I believed this movie. I believed The Survivalist when I heard him read, and so there was no doubt he was the guy for the role. And Reba McEntire was someone who the executives at Universal, Jim Jackson, Casey Silver, said, there's this country singer, Reba McEntire, you probably know her, she wants to get into the movies. I thought, oh my God, that's the last thing I need as a non-actress for the movie, because this is my first movie and I really wanted good actors in all the parts. But I said, if she'll come out and read for us, I mean, there's no reason not to read her. And she flew herself out to LA, and I fell in love when she walked through the door. She was so engaging and so wonderful. You could just tell her natural style would lend itself to the role of Heather Gummer.
We were just so lucky with Reba McEntire, Michael Gross, Finn Carter, Fred, and Kevin. We were just universally lucky with the...
Well, it was great. It was great from a writer's point of view to stand there and go, yeah, that's the way to do it. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, as opposed to sort of sitting there chewing your fingernails, wondering what you're going to say to the director to get him to change the line reading, and it really wasn't necessary.
Alexander Grzinski was the director of photography on the film, and we wanted a kind of warm feeling throughout, and to picture perfection as, although kind of run down and it had seen better days, it was kind of a romantic place. We really only have two interiors in the movie, the store and Bert and Heather's basement. And it's a real challenge for a director of photography to be outside all the time and be at the mercy of the elements.
1, 2, 3.
And my editor, Nick Brown, was always there to give encouragement, but also to say when something wasn't working well. He was always brutally honest, and I love that about Nick. He went on to cut City Slickers and Heart and Souls for me as well. An action sequence is really made in the cutting room out of many little pieces of both first unit and second unit photography. Steve Wilson directed the excellent second unit with Virgil Harper as the director of photography.
Look, these creatures are absolutely unprecedented.
Yeah, but where do they come from?
That was a big question, though, where the creatures came from. And people kept asking. I mean,
Well, they insisted
there was
on
a
it.
debate about that.
There was a big debate about it early in the process. First of all, we didn't care. And since I'm the one who comes out of science fiction films, I was saying there's only 4 places they can come from. They're either radioactive, or they're a biological experiment, or they're from outer space, or they've always been there. This is the only options you have. So I didn't want to say it. And I said, in fact, I'll go one better. Let's just say all of them.
Doesn't matter where they come from. Yeah.
It was a no-win situation to answer where they come from, really, for me, because there are only the standard few places. Where can they come from? Radiation, outer space. I mean, we've heard them all. And would you figure out where they come from in the short time the film takes place in once you discover these creatures? So I thought that it was more reality-based and realistic that they wouldn't figure it out. When we first got involved with Gail Ann Hurd, she had worked with these makeup effects guys who turned out to be brilliant and a godsend for the making of Tremors, Alec Gillis and Tom Woodruff.
I think in the script they went so far as to describe that they have multi-pieced mouths and these snake-like tentacle tongues that come out, and beyond that we were sort of given some free rein. Whenever we're designing a creature, even if it's some kind of a fantastic monster, we really like to go to research books of real animals, looking at forms and details like skin texture, coloring, even the way an animal moves, and so it has some sort of basis in reality. If there's no reality, if it's all completely made up, completely fantastic, there's sort of an unreal quality to it that's hard to get over. So we would meet with Steve and Brent and Ron, and at the time we were sort of just getting our own shop established, and we didn't really have a base of operations. We would meet with them at a restaurant in Burbank and show up with a pile of books under our arms, sit down, spread them all out all over the table, and sit and drink coffee and go through these books and come up with a design.
They would say, when do we get to come and see your shop? And we'd say, well, this is more convenient for all of us, sort of a halfway point. And so, ultimately we did have to say, we're making some arrangements, as soon as you give us the check, then you can come over. And it was pretty tight there for a while.
They needed to be able to move fast, and they needed to hunt by sound, and they needed to be big enough to eat a number of people, so you didn't think, well, gee, it ought to be full by now. And beyond that, there were certain sort of obvious things, the cigar shape, and we did come up with the idea of the spikes on the sides, that we felt like this is how they would push them. I had read somewhere that earthworms push themselves with these stiff hairs on their sides, so I thought, okay, we'll incorporate that.
Yeah, it must push itself along with these. All of them pushing at once. That's why it moves so fast.
Yeah, we had an early concept that we loved, so to speak. that had the whole worm, the whole inside of a worm would kind of extrude out of this big blubbery outer mass, and we just saw it as this kind of weird, yucky quality of motion. And we did some sketches and sent them over to Steve, and he passed them on to Gail. And then we got a call back from someone in Gail's office. The sketches had been going around the office, and they just said, oh, "What are you guys designing? There's just something that's just way too phallic about this symbol." And then we stopped and thought, "Oh yeah, we were calling it a turtleneck, and they were calling it a foreskin."
Yeah, Gail said that when we would fax the drawings over, all the women in the office would pass them around and giggle. So we kind of changed our tact there a little bit.
I really wanted something different in the mouth, but I didn't go much beyond that. There's a line in the script, and you can probably find it. It says something about the mouth opens like a grotesque flower.
So we started thinking about that and thinking that kind of implies almost a bending kind of muscular action, and what we did not want to do was repeat what had been done in Dune, because in Dune they sort of the sandworms were like earthworms, sort of more muscular, and they seemed to be kind of like a long muscular tube rather than anything with a skeletal structure or armor plating and so on. So we decided that the tact we would take would be from as realistic a standpoint as possible, that if a creature were to be swimming through sand or dirt, it would need a pointed armored head so that it could push that matter away, and then the rest of the body then would have some sort of muscular action. But the idea was that they would speed through the dirt like killer whales.
The whole idea was that for the first part of the movie, all we see are the tentacles that are coming out of the creature, and the idea there is that as the audience, we're misled into thinking, well, these are the creatures, they're only 6 or 8 feet long, and they're only about this big around, and maybe there's a way that you can deal with them, and it turns out that those are really much smaller tip of the iceberg. So that came about from the script. They weren't really described in any detail, and we did a whole series of different sketches. Some of them were very, very ornate looking, almost, again, following through with this flower motif. They had sort of an arrangement of little barbs around the outside that sort of looked like the petals of a flower with a very vicious mouth inside. And we looked at a lot, again, going back to real creatures as a basis. We used a lot of elements of, for example, a slug to give it that kind of a fleshy feel along both sides of the whole length of the tentacle. For the tentacles, we had mechanical versions of those. I think we had 3 full-length mechanical versions, and then we had a slightly shorter version, which we called our attack tentacle, that had a little tighter control over it. And that was the one that we always had leaping at Kevin Bacon, or just barely missing him when it was coiling around and trying to strike. We had a whole array of different pieces. And the worm never really existed full scale, with the exception of the dead body of the creature that has crashed into the retaining wall when it's chasing Val and Earl across the desert.
Hey, check this out! I found the ass end! Jesus, we really caught something here!
And Brent Maddock, one of the writers, he's a real practical guy. We were describing all the pieces we would make and the mechanics that would be inside them, and he said, "Okay, that's good, but what about a hand puppet? Don't you think we should have a hand puppet?" And we sort of said, "Okay, we'll have a hand puppet," and we used that hand puppet more than we ever expected.
Art Brewer was the special effects supervisor on the show, and he built a hydraulic rig that would bring our worm puppets up from underground. And the way we get a clean break is to have a big styrofoam sheet of textured ground material that it was easy to break through, and then there was a lot of loose dirt and big air cannons to kick up dirt and dust. And for one of the shots, because we wanted to have the creatures have a lot of life when they're bursting up, I went inside one of the creatures, that was basically suspended like a big cone shape on these heavy-duty springs, and I was underneath, and I had a little respirator mask on, and I had a walkie-talkie and a little flashlight, and basically was camping out under there.
Walter Chang Gets Eaten was an example of where we really overlapped with Art Brewer. We had to create an effect where a worm bursts right up through the floorboards and snatches a guy and thrashes him around and pulls him right down. So we had our worms that we had used out in the desert, and we knew basically how those needed to work, but the challenge here was to get up enough speed that we could bring it up and break through the breakaway floorboards and so on. Make that happen in the soundstage, which had like a water tank. I think it was a water tank, but it was a pretty narrow corridor that dropped down about 10 feet. So what Art came up with was a track that a dolly rode on with a boom arm on it, and we mounted our worm on the end of that boom arm, and about 10 of us pushed that dolly as fast as we could, and then levered the arm up right at the last minute, so we got a lot of good speed and upward momentum.
1, 2, 3, action!
And we got the initial burst through, and we had guys on the cables pulling the jaws open so it would open up. And then in a separate cut, we showed the tentacles coming out, wrapping around Walter Chang, and starting to pull him back. We had a bicycle seat rigged inside the mouth of the creature so that the actor could sit on that comfortably inside the gullet. And I think he was about up to his chest or his waist or so. And we had a fake leg that we made for him that stuck out the side of the creature so that it would look like things had just been broken into an awkward way, and that it looked like one leg was swollen and the other leg was broken and pushed out to the front, and we had the tentacles wrapped around him.
Son of a bitch!
We had just come off of Aliens recently, and we had said to ourselves, Aliens was a dark movie. Everything was wet in it and slimy. This seems to be more about, broad daylight, hot dust. Let's stay away from the slime. Let's just let them be, a little drier and create their own character that way. That's a little different than what you usually see. And we didn't slime up the mouth. We let it. It was glossy because of the coatings that we had put on it, but it was dry. And we saw it in the dailies, and the editor had remarked that it looked kind of like it was painted with nail polish, and we kind of didn't fully understand that comment, but understood what he was reacting to, which was the lack of wetness. So we started putting the slime on it and started doing the webbing in between the mouth.
Look! We can make it! We can make it!
So that by the time we got to the point where the dead creature had rammed into that retaining wall, and they break it away and the head kind of lolls out, and there's a POV shot where the camera's moving and all this dripping slime and all that. I mean, we really went overboard with the wetness there, and we saw it at a test screening with a bunch of guys, heavy metal guys, with Metallica t-shirts and all that, guys that would really eat that up. And when they saw all that dripping slime, the whole place, it was like the roof went off the theater. Everybody was cheering, and we looked at each other and we said, slime. Never underestimate the value of slime. We also did a lot of guts. we would provide the intestines of the creatures to the physical effects crew, and they would load them into their air mortars or, you know, whatever their charges were to blow them sky high. And we had guts for shots where people were, you know, pelted by a storm of guts, which was a pretty funny moment in the script where the obnoxious kid gets whacked in the face by a big piece of intestine. And we made those, a lot of those were made out of cotton batting stuffed into pantyhose and soaked in our methyl cell slime, orange tinted methyl cell slime. We also got some pumpkin pie filling, and filled it up, you know, for an extra little squishy splatty effect. And those started to, you know, decompose and rot, and they'd really start smelling like real intestines.
Take it, take the bait. Yeah, all right, all right. Yeah. Look at it. Yeah. Oh. Yeah. All right. Good one,
We were also introduced to Dennis and Robert Skotek, Bob Skotek, by Gail Ann Hurd, and they had worked with her on Aliens, and they were about to do work for her on The Abyss, and they are just primo miniature guys.
My role on Tremors was as a director of photography, and in most of the work that we do, I'm the director of photography and will direct the action at certain times when my brother isn't directing the action. He art directs and I'm the director of photography. During Tremors, there was a lot of very difficult lighting challenges in very specific areas that, as a director of photography, I had to deal with. And among them were matching to the live action's lighting, which in a lot of cases was the sun, was outdoor sunlight, which is a challenge.
It was so hot, and we were shooting in the summer. I remember it was 109 outside, and one particular day we were shooting, and I had to squeeze up behind the back of the set and work on the backdrop. Now, there was enough light there that my shirt actually started smoking from the heat. And at that point, where I almost scorched myself, I said, you know, we're going to start working at night. So we started coming in the evening and working through the night, and the rest of that job was shot at night when it was much cooler outside, because we could not tolerate the heat on the set from our lights combined with the outside temperature.
Alec Gillis and Tom Woodruff's company built the creature miniatures for the film. The Forward built the miniatures of the basement interior and all the desert terrain, all the exteriors, all of the desert, which sounds sort of strange to build the desert, but in fact things had to be constructed, and there were backdrops that had to be painted, and there were the sagebrush and bush and cactus that had to be built, and all that to match live action. In the basement sequence, when the creature breaks through the wall into the survivalists' little into their basement and starts destroying their room, the full-sized creature was used to break through the wall. It was determined that to get all of the shots that were necessary, we had to do it in miniature. For example, there's a scene where the worm swings up and hits into the ceiling of the basement and breaks some ceiling tiles off. In that particular scene, that was done as a miniature, as a quarter-scale basement that was built fully to match the live-action set. And in that case, we were again able to do the things that the full-size couldn't do. The full-sized worm was not quite as long as that and would never reach up that far that fast to do it, and that's where we were able to help them out.
We had this situation with the basement with a lot of pieces that had been dressed in by the art department. And of course, for the art department to acquire magazines and a shell loader and and these various kinds of toolboxes is one thing that's an off-the-shelf item you set on the table. Of course, when we come in, any one of those items could be very terrifying to build and require weeks and weeks of work. One such item was a stool, just a standard like a bar stool, and it was sitting off in the corner. Well, we didn't want to not make it because we knew it was going to be a difficult piece to make, so we included that as in the miniature. And it turned out we had spent 2 weeks. I've spent 2 weeks building this thing myself, so I don't even know what the cost of making that one prop was. Probably more than some of the low-budget movies made in Hollywood. But one of the things that came up with that stool is that after the way the shot was originally set up, that chair was going to be knocked over by the creature and actually get hit during a take. And we thought, well, it's going to take us 2 days to repair this chair if it falls down. So we talked to Ron, and we said, we've got this really terribly expensive stool. Would it be a really bad thing if it was off on the corner and didn't have to get hit by the creature? He said, no, if it's an expensive chair, it can be off on the side. I don't want to see your chair get hurt. So that's what we did.
We did an odd shot where we matched a live-action, full-sized person's feet with our miniature, and we did it all as a in-house kind of thing. We did an insert of what would have been Michael Gross's feet as he drops a gun. A gun falls to the floor, and then the camera does a whip pan onto the creature. And this was a proposal that we came up with, and Ron seemed to like it, so we gave it a try, and the shot worked out quite well. But we do a whip pan. In the middle of that whip pan, there's a cut, and we go from one of our guys working for us, his feet, taking Michael Gross's feet, his place, and we dropped a gun on the floor, and then whip pan directly onto a miniature and do a matched cut. And it looks flawless and looks like it was all part of it. So this tended to make to create a scene. This made a scene where we could pan from the actors directly onto a miniature and get a sense that the two are integrated, rather than being two separate kinds of shots, or we only see the creature or we only see them. This way it got them both together.
We decided once again that we would make a hand puppet, because we hadn't originally planned to make a miniature hand puppet of the worm. And what we did was we built a worm head that had cables that you could pull cables, and you could pull levers and open and close the jaw pieces, and that was on a handle so that you could get the head movement. And then we made the rest of the body cover your arm about up to here, and that was the one that was used for thrashing and crashing up into the ceiling and thrashing that around and dropping back down.
The one thing we didn't have in our location of our needs was this cliff, this huge cliff face for the end of the movie, and set up at the beginning of the movie. And so we went to Illusion Arts, a matte painting company, and they did an incredible job at creating this illusion that there were these cliffs at one end of the valley. And we relied on that, as well as the miniature cliffs at the end, which the creature actually burst through.
At the end of the film, the payoff, the creature dies at the end of the film, and he crashes through the cliff and lands on the ground and splats, and he's dead. We had to create a miniature version of that cliff for our purposes. We did it as a perspective shot, and a perspective shot is pretty straightforward, kind of a simple concept. And what it is you build something that's smaller than the real object, and then you put something behind it and line the two up with the right camera angle, and it looks as though it's larger than it actually is. So you're bringing a small object, putting it close to the camera, and putting people into it further away, and it looks like it's an actual full-size cliff.
When we were shooting the miniature cliff at the end for the ending, the creature bursting out of the wall of the cliff, we had doubles for each of the actors, because they had to be way up on a scaffolding high above this miniature cliff with a forced perspective to think that they were standing on this cliff. And we were waiting for the female stunt double to arrive, Rhonda's stunt double, and she never showed up. So there were no women there actually in that day of photography. So I got drafted in and had a wig put on, and I played Rhonda for that scene. But finally, I cut myself out of the movie because that shot was not necessary. So we ended up leaving it on the floor. But for a brief time, I played Rhonda in the movie, yes. At the first preview, the audience was really into the movie, and they were screaming and laughing and cheering, and it was really a thrilling experience to see it with an audience for the first time. But at the end of the movie, when Val and Rhonda are talking by the truck, you really want them to be together. You want them to get together. And the audience started chanting, "Kiss her, kiss her," and they were stomping their feet, and it was, the whole auditorium was just shaking with this "kiss her" chant. And the lights came up afterwards, and the studio said, "We really need to have the two of them kiss." We had Val and Earl finally get out of town to go to Bixby, and then conveniently turn around when they realized they had left their lighter with Rhonda.
I just flat don't believe it. After 5 years, you finally take my advice. You fall for a quality woman. And then what do? You stand there doing nothing.
Earl, get real. Girls like that, they just don't go for guys like me.
Listen, you don't decide if you're worthless. She does.
If we're going to Bixby, could we please just go the hell to Bixby?
Hey, I think that woman still has our lighter.
Well, hell, that's a good lighter.
So we went out and shot a new ending, had Val and Rhonda kissing as the crane goes up, and it was one of the lessons to be learned from what can happen if an audience really loves your movie. It can turn it a different way, and maybe not a way that you want it to.
Rhonda?
Yeah?
I just wanted to.
Fire! Give you
Well, it just suddenly hit me, you know. Stampede.
Фред.
Как она?
Ничего. Нервничает немного.
Я привез ей кое-что, ей понравится.
Фред, это же денег стоит. Смотри, что Фред привез тебе.
Раскинем картишки вечером.
Мне за ней приглядывать надо.
Понятно. Ладно, заеду в четверг.
И еще патронов привези. Идем, Джастин. Тяни прохладнее. Я тебе сейчас воды принесу. Ты скоро поправишься. Джастин! С каждым годом дорога все хуже.
Дожди размывают. Прибавь газу.
Не отвлекай водителя во время движения. Нэнси! Нэнси, поехали!
Пойду гляну, как остальные. Встречаемся здесь.
Удивительно, что еще ездит.
Ты уже пожалела, что колледж отправил тебя сюда?
Мне страшно, но я не жалею.
А ты знаешь, что он тоже учился в этом колледже целый год? А потом не заладилось с учебой. Хотя если бы забросил свои ковбойские штучки, цены бы ему не было. Не хочу делать комплимент этой ослиной заднице. Простите мой французский, но у парня есть способности. Чат!
Надо уходить!
Я не хочу! Я останусь!
Милая, мы не можем остаться здесь. Но не волнуйся, когда мы доберемся до скал, они нас не достанут.
Добро пожаловать в городок совершенства в Неваде. Население 14 человек. Обычный городок. Ну что, Венди, сколько уже?
640.
Но в нем происходит нечто странное. Нечто непонятное. И люди начинают волноваться.
Какого черта тут творится?
Продюсер Гейл Энхерт,
Эти существа не похожи ни на что.
работавший над фильмами «Терминатор», «Чужие» и «Бездна».
Откуда они взялись?
Может быть, из космоса. На местных не похожи. Представляет совершенно новый фильм ужасов.
Как они закопали фургон?
«Дрожь земли».
Кевин Бейкон,
Фред Уорд и Майкл Гроус играют в этом продолжающем славной традиции хорроров 80-х в фильме ужасов. Бейкон и Уорд играют Вэлла и Эрла, местных техников. Скажи, это что, работа для человека с мозгами?
Найди тут хоть одного и спросим. Они по-своему смешные. Они совсем не похожи на киногероев. Никто не разбирается в мусоре лучше нас.
Да.
Коктейль?
Давай.
Меньше всего им хочется сражаться с какими-то там монстрами. Их тут миллион!
Но вскоре Вэл и Эрл попадают в гущу событий и становятся местными героями. Надо вызвать полицию. Тебе лучше не вмешиваться в это.
Уже вмешался.
Беги, беги! Скорее!
Они под землей! Под землей!
Вскоре весь город вступает в бой. В том числе и Майкл Гроус в роли Берда Каннера, специалиста по выживанию в экстремальных ситуациях, всегда готового принять бой.
На то он и специалист. Когда происходит нечто подобное, он всегда готов. Мы вооружаемся. Укрепим периметр, выставим охрану. И эти змеи скоро вымрут.
Правильно.
Он недооценивает угрозу.
Дебют звезды кантри Рибы Маккентайр в большом кино состоялся в роли жены Берда.
Конечно, происходящее никому не нравится, но со временем все свыкаются с мыслью о том, что в любую секунду их может съесть гигантский червяк.
У режиссера Рода Андервуда свой взгляд на происходящее.
Монстры из-под земли звучит как бред, но это на самом деле страшно. Они ведь могут быть где угодно. От них не скроешься, не спрячешься. По ходу фильма выясняется, что безопасных мест попросту нет. Вот так! Когда-нибудь я уеду подальше от этого места.
«Дрожь земли».